Hey guys, this is Tom at VSE, and we got a huge announcement for the 2020 plus GM Duramax L5P owners. So this little dude is called a T93, and this thing has literally kept us from tuning these 2020 plus platform L5Ps for quite a while. This is a much needed modification to the truck. Tuning is now available for the 2020 plus L5P platforms equipped with the GM 10-speed trucks. So why is the 10-speed so required for tuning? Problem is, I have a bunch of these, and this is just one of them. And I tow and I drive around in the mountains, and they're loaded, and they're more than just driving around having fun. And they're a truck that they don't exhibit the same behavior as the 6-speed Allisons ever did. The 10-speed Allisons, while they drive fine unloaded and they drive fine in town, sometimes when they're unloaded or sometimes from full throttle at a stop, they are a problem. So one of the biggest issues that we ever saw right out of the gate when we started turning the power up on these trucks are, especially from a stop, the truck from full throttle, they always start in second gear, which is fine, but they pretty much sit at the RPM limiter through every gear with a huge delay between the gear changes. And it gets even worse when you get into the bigger gears. It doesn't really have the ability to hold 7th gear and 8th gear, which we'll get into in a second on clutch packs in the 10L1000. So what happens is the truck feels kind of uncomfortable under load, especially when the power's turned up quite a little bit. It feels like it's not really putting the power down to the ground, especially through the converter. So we're addressing that in tuning. And in tow haul mode, another thing that we're addressing is how does it tow when it's in the mountains, and specifically how does it downshift through some of the gears, and how does it hold certain gears out when it's loaded. So what I found through my trucks, and again I own about 5 of these L5Ps in the 2020 plus platform, what I find is in the mountains it's always been kind of a pain in the butt to have the truck be in the right gear and actually using the exhaust brake slowing down or trying to speed up and then maintaining a gear. It wants to shift quickly into 9th or 10th, and then it wants to downshift back into 7th or 8th, and then it wants to shift back into 9th or 10th. So it's this constant gear hunting. And literally, because we couldn't get into this TCM, this has been the problem for quite a little while. The other issue is the partial EMC. So not a lot of people know what that is, but the 68 RFE guys would know what this is. Partial EMC is when the torque converter partially locks up during a gear change, or when it's driving around town unloaded. So if the user goes through some of the gears, 7th, 8th, 9th gear, or 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th gear, the converter isn't fully locked. It goes from unlocked to partial lockup, then to lock. And it's just the way that it is, and anybody that doesn't believe that literally can take any snap-on scan tool, a Modus or a Zeus, and literally connect, and then you'll see that there's a lot of partial EMC going on with this converter. That is the cause of a lot of converter failures and converter ballooning that we've seen in the industry. So that's what we've seen as far as the EMC goes. We're going to take some of that out during tuning. So there's 5 key items that we're going to do when we tune these trucks, and it's important to know they're going to drive quite a bit different when they're tuned compared to the way that they are stock, especially when power's been added to the truck. So first thing is removal of the partial EMC. We're not removing it entirely because it's important that partial EMC stays on during the low load times driving around town. The converter can be partially locked up and then go to unlock and then partially lock. It makes a smooth on and off throttle transition. That's totally fine. But when the user's in the gas, we're going to go from unlocked to locked. When it makes a gear change, unlock to lock. So it's important to note that they're going to feel a little more firm. You're going to feel it. It's not harsh. You're just going to notice that the transmission's actually been tuned. Second, in the normal drive mode, so if you floor these trucks from a stop, and again, we're not designing transmissions and transmission tuning to redefine the limits of any 1/8 or 1/4 mile time, right? These, unless they're built, are not going to be nearly as solid as the 6-speed transmissions, no matter what anybody says. They're just not internally and hydraulically quite as robust. But we're going to eliminate some of the skip shifting. So the truck from a stop, you take off, put it to the floor, it's going to go from 2nd to 5th, and then we're going to lock the converter right away. And then 5th to 7th and lock the converter right away. we're going to bring the converter on during the gear change to minimize some of those large hesitations. That's what we found during testing and tuning. And again, we've been testing these for quite a while before we've released this video. So this isn't something across multiple trucks, not just this one truck. So this is something that we know that the users are going to really like, and you're going to experience a nice shift feel. The other thing is there's a delayed engagement when you speed up through some of the gears, second, third, fourth. It's a lot of gear changes. So if users have drove our 10-speed Ford transmission tuning, these are going to operate similar to that. You're going to start out in second. It's going to be a nice, comfortable shift into fourth, and then we're going to lock the converter. You're going to feel some of these gear changes. We really like it, and we've gotten feedback from several people that have drove these. Again, we don't just test on one truck. We have a ton of them, and we test all this stuff before we send it out to the consumer base so we know what's up. Third, in tow haul, again, I personally cannot stand, and I use my truck to tow. We literally test these under load. I cannot stand the constant, when you hit a slight overpass and you're in 10th gear, there's plenty of power in these L5Ps to tow max gross vehicle weight without the constant downshifts in a 9th, and then in an 8th, and then unlock the converter, then back in a 9th, then 10th. Every single grade, the truck should pull it just fine. So we're going to eliminate all those constant shuttle gear changes up and down. It's super annoying. We're also going to increase the clutch holding pressure in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th gear under the high load and the low RPM ranges to try to get the clutch packs. And we're going to talk about the C6 clutch here in a second to try to get the clutch packs to hold a little more power. Fourth, we're going to raise line pressure in nearly every gear. So I know that certain people have used that as a marketing tactic to try to sell transmission tuning in the past. Oftentimes it just results in high incoming, outgoing pump temperatures. So it's a problem when you just arbitrarily turn line pressure up using certain solenoids to do that. We're not going to do that in the 10 speeds. We've never done it in the T87As. We've never done it in the previous generation Allisons, A50s, and the T87s. So we're going to raise line pressure just enough to be able to protect those C6 and those C4 clutch packs to get them to hold under a little more force some of the high torque that these L5Ps can generate, especially when they're tuned. And fifth, we're going to reduce some of the shift times. So we've historically done that. It's not just taking shift times out across the board. We're going to take shift times out when it's required. So some of those delayed shifts, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, especially when you put it to the floor, we're going to remove a lot of the immediate shift times. So we'll take a few microseconds out of them, but it's not going to be so prevalent that we're going to result in clutch binding. And again, we've tested this quite a little bit. So it'll be a more fun drive for a lot of people that are buying this. And then mountain mode. So we're excited. I don't know what the heck mountain mode's been for these trucks. I've used it. I have a house in the mountains. It's super annoying. You put it in mountain mode, it does literally nothing. I'm turning mountain mode into drag racing mode. So you want to go to the track and run your best 8th mile time and maybe redefine some limits. We're going to put the truck in the proper gear and the proper skip shift and the proper lockup for the gears that matter during 8th mile and quarter mile. So look for that. It's going to be fun. So if you don't want mountain mode to be turned into something like drag racing mode, just put in the modifications, or just say, I don't want that to be done, because we're going to do that to nearly every truck. And it will be awesome. It's going to result in the fastest 8th and quarter mile times. So what the users are going to see as a result of transmission tuning: increased line pressure, as we discussed. There's going to be improved shift timing, and there's going to be a lot better torque converter lockup strategy. So I think that's going to really wrap it up for a lot of the 10-speed guys. I'm excited to release that. So what's required? So you're going to need a laptop or some way to flash the calibration profiles into the TCM, this guy. You're going to need an MVP i3, and you're going to need 4 credits and this T93 to be unlocked. So those are the things that are required, and then a tune file purchase from us. And then I also wanted to discuss a couple of these clutch pack scenarios before you know, if people ask a lot of questions on why we're doing certain things. So there's 4 significant clutches and then 6 other clutches that are required to make the gear changes happen in these 10L1000s. So C6 clutch on every single truck that we've ever seen come in here. C6 clutch which is responsible for the damage that occurs in the 7th gear. Almost every single C6 has been burned up, and almost every single C4 has been burned up. So if you ever have a 10-speed that has delayed engagement going into reverse, like some of the Fords get, especially stock, those are the 2 clutches that we're going to try to protect via some of the skip shift strategies and some of the line pressure control. So again, C6, it's a problem. I get it. The converters like the balloon under load, I get it. We're going to bring some of those shift times down, raise line pressure just enough to protect it. And we're going to try to protect the torque converter, especially during the partial EMC times and high thermal engagement, to make the converters live as long as possible. HP Tuners did an awesome job here, and we've given them a ton of feedback on their editor. So they have an editor here. We've used it in a lot of our trucks. We agree with a lot of the changes in there, but we can change shift scheduling, shift pressures, shift timing, torque converter scheduling, which is super important in some of these trucks. I think they did an awesome job with the editor. Really, if anybody has feedback, provide it to us, but we're going to be modifying constantly this stuff. Pressures, scheduling, the general shift schematics. These Allisons are on and off clutch apply transmission, so it's super important to protect some of those off-going clutches and some of the ongoing clutches. So HP Tuners did literally an awesome job, and we'll continue to provide feedback as we modify these throughout the time. So one other thing, this guy is located right under here next to the ECM. It's pretty easy to pull out. You're going to pull these out. This is going to be the TCM Exchange. We're going to send you a pre-programmed, unlocked, licensed TCM. You're going to put it in. You're going to go through a quick relearn cycle, so it's super easy to do. It's going to be a relearn similar to the 6-speed Allisons, really nothing more than that. And then we also recommend just driving this thing for a tank of fuel, normally loaded, or however you guys would normally drive it, to get this guy to relearn all the adaptive learnings that are inside this. This guy has memory inside of it for a lot of the relearn scheduling, so it's super important. Just give it a chance. Just like the 10-speed Fords, just like the T87As, give it a shot to relearn, so you just don't, you know, go out and mash it to the floor and burn things up right away. If you guys have any other questions, 833-789-7700. We'll have a SKU live, and if you guys have any other questions, hit us up on Instagram or Facebook. We're always really happy to help, and there's going to be a ton of questions when this comes out. And another thing, this isn't just for the Allisons. We tune a ton of gas burners. So Camaros, all the Silverados, 1500s, these guys are all run these T93s. So we tune them all. So if you're a gas guy and you need TCMs from us, or if you need TCM tuning or recommendations on help, we're a big input into HP Tuners to get these things alive. So I got a couple cars that run this, and I got a couple trucks that run this. This is a super important controller for anything other than just the L5P. Hey guys, one last thing I want to mention. A lot of people are going to ask us about this. There's Ratio Tech, there's Suncoast, there's RevMax, and there's a few other transmission builders out there that have built these 10-speed Allisons. So will TCM tuning work with those? 100% yes. We've actually tested Ratio Tech. We've actually tested a Suncoast kit. We've actually tested the RevMax kit. So they're going to be fine. We've also tested our own, so it's going to be okay. But what I need you guys to do when you go to check out, put in the explain modification section. If you have one of those kits in this truck, we need to know it's extremely crucial, especially if it's a Ratio Tech. If you got that kit put in there, literally just put it in the explain modification section so we know exactly what we're doing with these transmissions, beans that we've tested every single one of them. That's all we got.